so many things. I don't want to take anything away from him. So, we'll do that, but before we begin, we'd like to have just a moment of silence so we can individually say a prayer to ourselves, if you will, that we'll be open-minded, that we'll listen and be able to understand what's taking place. We're here to help you. We're not here for any other reason but to help our fellow man. Because these things are going to happen. You know, I need you, you're going to need me. We're going to need each other. So that's the important thing. So, if you will, please just take a moment and in your own way, thank your Father in heaven for everything He's given you. Okay, so I'd like to take the time right now to turn this over to Richard. Richard will explain to you as to what his background is. We also try to bring in professionals in every area to give these presentations.
The reason we didn't have the usual prayer is because we got people here from other denominations, and we felt this would be more just. And by the way, we welcome everybody. This is not strictly a Mormon thing. It's for everybody. You're more than welcome here. Well, I need to set the right tone for this meeting. I'm going to read something to you. Take a minute. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. And why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Well, he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On Christmas Day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold, through the parka's fold it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close and the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing, heel and toe. He turned to me and said, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking you that you won't refuse my last request." Now he seemed so low I couldn't say no. Then he says with a sort of a moan, "It's the cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead, it's my awful dread of the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair, cremate my last remains." Now a pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, and oh, he looked so ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and raved all day of his home in Tennessee. And before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried harder driven. With the corpse half hid, I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brain and bronze, but you promise me that it's up to you to create those last remains." Now a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart how I cursed that load. In the long, long night by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow, till I went through and on I went through the dog, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I'd often sing to the hateful thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake LaBarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I could see in a trice it was called the Alice May. I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then here, said I, with a sudden cry, is my crematorium. Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I didn't know why. And the greasy smoke in an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I did not know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear. But the stars came out and they danced about. Ere began I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I briefly said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked, and the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking calm and cool in the heart of the furnace roar. And he made a smile you could see a mile, and he said, please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plum Tree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge of Lake LaBarge, I cremated Sam McGee. Okay, that set the right tone? I hope so. We're talking about cold. We haven't had a bad winter. We've had a lot of snow, but it hasn't been very far north or east of us that things really became difficult. Out on the plains, they were talking about minus 30s and minus 40s. Lots of snow, horrible wind, and so forth. Could that happen here? Sure. It has happened here. We could have it. Well, you know, you live during the winter time. It may be fine. It may be, you know, cold at times and so forth, but you don't know what and when we will have a bad winter. I don't know if any of you are old enough. I think a few of you are. Remember when they built the mall down here, Fashion Place? They built it, and they finished it just as winter, it was in the winter. And a big snow came and caved in part of it. And they had to rebuild it. These things happen. So I spent my time in my life, a lot of it in the cold weather. I was inducted into the Army during the Korean War, and I spent that time at the Mountain and Cold Weather Training Command in Camp Hale, Colorado, which is at 10,000 feet up near Leadville. And they would bring in a battalion of soldiers at a time, and we would train them in skiing and cold weather survival. Our training went on, outside training went on until it got minus 40 degrees. And I can remember a couple of times standing in formation in the morning at minus 60. And then I've been I've skied for 68 years. I've been a patroller, been an instructor. I've done it all. So I've done a lot of work with people that have been injured in the cold. So, and then my wife and I spent 18 months in Siberia. So,
Voluntarily.
pardon me?
Was it voluntarily?
As a missionary.
Yeah, okay, that was almost voluntarily.
You don't know what cold means until you stand on a street corner waiting for the trolley in Russia, and the wind's coming out of eastern Siberia, and the women's overcoats come right to their ankles, and everybody wears a shapka, you know, those fur hats. Wouldn't dare wear one around here. Somebody had painted animal rights people. But we want to talk about how best things to do to survive a as cheaply as we can. You don't need a lot of special equipment. There are some things I would advise you to buy, but not much. So let's start with clothing. All of you have a nice warm coat? Have a big heavy coat?
We think it is.
Oh, how do you like it? If you're out in the cold too long, it may be too much. Because the thing you cannot do in the cold, was, getting down around 32 and lower, you can't sweat. Why? You'll sweat all right, but you don't want to. Your clothes get wet, and if you've got any cotton on, you're gonna stay wet and you're gonna stay cold. So the best thing you can do is wear your clothes in a layer. You have an inner layer, that's your underclothes. You have a middle layer and then an outer layer. Now, the clothes that are close to your body, the best thing you can do in the winter is to have the kind of clothes that wick the water away from you. Does anybody know what kind of clothes that are? What kind of fabric that is?
Wool.
Wool. Or some of the polypropylenes. Oh, excuse me. Let me pass this around. This is just some paper and just pass it around. You can write on it if you like. Oh, they've got some right there. Have you? Yeah, pass it over. What you have on the top of that paper is kind of a cold weather strategy. Whatever you're doing, whether you're in your home or whatever, these are the things that you've got to pay attention to. Extremely important. So these are the things we'll be talking about. Let me go back to clothes. The clothes that are close to your body should be something that wicks the water away. Wool is expensive. There's some polypropylenes, these man-made fibers, and do the same thing. And so, if you buy something, let's see if I've got some here. Yeah. These come in 3 layers, 3 different grades of thickness. And this is made of polypropylene. And if I have them close to my body, when I sweat, it pushes the water, takes the water away from it. So I'm not wet. Because if you're out in the cold, you can sweat if you're working hard. So the first layer should be something like that. Wool scratching. It's expensive too. The middle layer should be something that will keep you warm. How many of you ever worn the old long-handled underwear? They're still around. Something like that, or another propylene. The outer layer should be something that is not waterproof. Why? Anybody know?
Moist, won't breathe.
Excuse me?
It won't breathe.
Yeah, it won't breathe. And you'll sweat. Now Gore-Tex is a fabric that will it'll keep the water away from you, like wet snow and so forth, and it will breathe, but it's expensive. If you get a parka or a coat and put some, you can spray on some waterproofing. You just want to be water resistant. Usually in extremely cold weather, you don't worry about rain too much. Around here, sometimes we have to, or snow that's very wet. So you have 3 layers, an inner layer to keep the water away from you, a middle layer to keep you insulated, and an outer layer to protect you from the weather and the wind. Now, this is just an ordinary old ski parka. It's got a hood on it, it's zipped in here. It isn't very thick. It won't keep me very warm, but it will keep the wind off and it will keep the wind chill down. One of the best things you can do in that middle layer is put on something that is porous. I brought this old sweater, I've had it forever. If you look at it at the light, you can see there's holes in it. Not because it's old, but that's the way it's made. The old Vikings used to take their fishing nets and wrap around their bodies and put their clothes on. You see why? What's the best insulation you can have? Air. What you do is you have a middle layer. If you can have something like this, that really gives you insulation. And then if you get too warm, you can start taking some of it off. But this will protect you. And there's all kinds of, you got an old sweater and look at it, if it isn't one of those that are extremely tightly weaved, it'd be perfect for this. So you don't have to go out and buy anything. Any of you guys still, any of you folks, you still use these? Oh yeah. One good thing for this, in extremely cold weather, as you breathe, this is going to be frostbitten. You get a frost on it, you're going to see it. And the reason for that is that as you breathe that warm air out, it's just going to turn to ice right on you because it's moist. Putting this on here will help you. The other thing that it does, and this is important, in the wintertime, if you want to keep your hands and feet warm, what's the best thing you can do? Put your hat on. Believe me. Why?
Because you lose so much heat out of your head.
Yeah. You ever seen an injury, a head injury? They always bleed profusely because you've got a lot of vessels up there. So what you want to do is put a hat on, but what people forget is the back of their neck. You cover that up, and it'll just feel much warmer than just a hat. Okay, what kind of hat do you wear? What kind of hats do you like?
University of Utah.
Well, I'm not going to get into that one. Let's see if I've got it here. Yeah. Whoops, backwards. Okay, it's a little porous. That's the way I want it. I don't want it. If it's too tight a weave, it's going to be too hot. You want something to cover your ears, part of your face. And these, you can get these. I got a handout I'll give you, and it tells you where you can buy some of these things. There's a place down on North Temple, just west of the fairgrounds. It's called the Ski Truck. It's the grungiest, dirtiest place you'll ever see. There's a big warehouse, and he must have 10,000 pairs of skis, most of them used. He buys used equipment. He's got everything in there, including hats for cheap. By the way, he dickers. Telling me, he says $5, say, well, I can only pay $4. He'll work with you. But this is critical. If you want to keep warm, keep a hat on. How about in your house? You haven't got any heat in your house. Is there anything wrong with wearing your hat? How about in bed?
That's what I do.
Yeah. This is important. Okay.
What about the hats that come over your face, which is the eye openings and that?
Oh, sure.
Are those okay?
Yeah, sure. Anything you put around your nose and mouth is going to get frosted. Just in its cold weather. Just got to recognize that. Please.
My father was a farmer, and out on the farm when it's 40 degrees below zero, he didn't have any of this equipment, but he would get one of us girls' nylons and cut it and put over his head, and then put his hat on, and that protected his face from frostbite.
Just with a nylon
Just
sock.
with a nylon sock. He'd tie it up on top, so it was in a knot, and then
You can go over to the REI or one of these other stores and buy very high-tech equipment for a lot of money, where you can use the things in your home, like these old sweaters.
that's what he had to do.
By the way, you can buy parkas down there at the ski truck cheap too. Wait for their sales to come on, and I've got their address and I think their telephone here, so that you can look there. There's a couple of other places too that are really good to look at for equipment that will do the job and you don't have to pay a fortune for it.
When you go into the DI here on 45th and Main, they have new coats and new shirts that are either with somebody's little insignia on them, or extra large or extra small sizes, but for dirt cheap, brand new, you can supplement a lot of stuff like you're talking about.
Good, thank you for saying that.
Does this ski place have new and used, or is it? What are the other
Yeah,
two?
he has everything.
Okay,
He buys, people come in there and sell their old equipment and clothing, but he also buys, you know, at the end of the ski year, he'll buy out the, whatever a ski shop has that they want to get rid of. So, now, clothing. Some of you ladies wear those leather shoe boots up to here. Look nice. They're terrible. They're too tight. If you like real tight Levi's, young men, women and men both, don't wear them. You don't want to wear clothes that are tight. You don't want to wear mittens or gloves that are tight. For the same reason, it cuts down your circulation. You want as much circulation as you can. So you have to kind of forget about fashion entirely and wear clothes that are kind of baggy. I told, I think I've taught this before, the last time I taught it. I said to somebody, what I said was, you ladies can wear these long-handled clothes, underwear. What? Yeah, you know, if you're wearing a pantsuit or something like that, it's okay. You could wear them to church. Just put on a long skirt. I guarantee you'll be a lot warmer. I was serving, I was in Ohio, and the war, I was there at the time of the 6-day war in Israel. And when they cut all our gas off and oil, and our church had no heat for 2.5 months. So everybody had come to church with their blankets, and they were all wearing long-handled underwear. And then, by the way, they took bricks and heated them up and then wrapped them in a cloth and put them on the floor and put their feet on them.
That's an old camping trick.
Yeah. Those sort of things, that's just survival. So you don't want to wear anything that's tight. You want to wear clothes that will wick the water, your underclothes will wick the water away from you. Now I think the garments, that you can buy long-handled garments, and I think they are polypropylene. So if you're a temple worker, you can get those. Let's see, what else is there about that? Oh, now, there's one thing you may want to think about if you think you're going to be outside quite a bit. Levi's are really bad in water. You get wet and they're going to freeze. You're just going to freeze in them. You can buy other kinds of clothes, but if you look around, again, go to the ski truck, the other places, and get a pair of ski pants. These aren't padded, but they're water resistant, and they're hard, they're tough. And if you can pick some up, you can pay a fortune for these things, or you can get some that are fairly cheap. But for a cold winter outdoor wear for pants, you can't beat these. The other thing is, and I don't know if you can even find them anymore, up at Smith & Edwards up in Willard, they carry a lot of Army surplus. And they used to have a lot of wool, old Army pants and shirts. But I don't know if they still do or not. Okay. In the house, slippers. Keep your feet warm. If you have throw rugs, put them where you're going to be standing a lot, like around front of your sink or something like that. Keeping your feet warm makes a big difference, as all of you know. But think about using something like that. If you can get they make some of these slippers out of this artificial leather. They're worthless because they make your feet sweat. If you can get a pair of real leather ones, or better yet, a pair of knitted woolen ones, maybe you got a grandmother or somebody that you know that can knit some for you. They're the best things. Put a pair of socks on, put those slippers on, and you'll be toasty warm. All right. Let's talk about, let's see if I missed anything here. Oh, yeah. If you're in a situation where you have to evacuate your home, and it's midwinter, and you haven't got a house, now all of us need shelter, we need food, and we need something, and we need heat. But you don't have a house. Think about this, your clothes then become your house. This is what the Eskimos have. Your clothes become your house. And think of it in that term, it's going to shelter you. A tent it keeps the weather out there, it doesn't warm. It shouldn't be warm. But your clothes can make you warm. You can be perfectly comfortable outside if you're dressed correctly. So if that happens, you can't stay in your home. Your alternative is to wear your clothes as though that's your house. I was up in Northwest Territories. My wife and I have done a lot of canoeing up there. And we stopped at a place where it was an Eskimo village. And it wasn't like you see in the movies, but they had a tent that they had made out of caribou hides. And they had 2 layers. And the hair on the outer layer was outside, and the hair on the inner layer was inside. So the 2 leather skins were like this. And we were there late August, and it was getting cold then. I walked into that tent, it was just as warm as could be. But you don't get that with a regular tent like you can buy around here. It just doesn't happen. Come on in, Paul. There's room. So, don't think of a tent as an alternate to your home. If it is, just make it for a few days. It won't do the job your home will. And it won't do the job as well as your clothes will either. Now, I haven't talked about footwear yet, so let's do that. Here is one thing that you may want to spend a little money for. Let me find it. I just threw everything in a pile here. These socks are a combination of wool and polyester. And they're soft and they're thick. And they're well worth the effort, or well worth the money to buy. If there's anything you're going to spend money on, this would be a good one. Again, look for the sales. These things can cost a lot, but they don't have to. I know RAI up here on the top of 33rd South, they sell these things almost by the crate load. They're really popular. But they have sales too. So think about your feet. Now, those of us who are older, our hearts aren't quite as efficient as they used to be. Now, our circulation isn't quite as good. And so it's a little more difficult for us to keep our hands and our feet warm. And if you happen to have congestive heart failure, you got a real problem. So keeping your hands and feet warm are critical. So you want to take a little extra effort on this. So what kind of shoes should you wear in the wintertime? Any ideas?
Not the kind that leak. I mean, really, we wear these,
Yeah,
but they're very porous.
they don't do the job. No,
I saw some flip-flops down at the store the other day. Somebody was wearing.
That's what my daughter wears all winter.
Be nice if you could all get some mucklucks. These
Yeah.
skin ones that the Eskimos use. I know a place where you could buy them, but in Minnesota, we'll get into that. There's a number of shoes you can buy, or boots really, that would help. The one that has the rubber on the bottom, on the sides, and then the from the ankle up, it's leather. What do you call those, Paul?
Muck boots.
But a good hiking shoe, a boot, is perfectly okay. You don't want to make them waterproof, but you want to make them water resistant. And again, you don't want something that's tight. Buy one that you can wear with a couple of pair of socks. That's important. Now, if you're on the outside at all, you're going to get wet. Your feet are going to get wet. It's just going to happen. So how do you keep your feet dry? Or how do you keep them from freezing? You change your socks. How do you dry the socks out? Well, if you've got a house, you can hang them up. What if you can't? You take it under your clothes, against your skin right here, and I hate that. And cold and everything, but that's, if you have no other way, you could do that. You could dry your socks out. But have enough socks around so that you can change them. Going around with cold feet is, you're asking for trouble, frankly. And I'll explain why in a little bit here. So when you get shoes, make sure that they've got a good sole on them. Make sure that they're at least water resistant. And if you can put waterproofing on it. It's usually like a wax. Every shoe store sells this stuff, and it's okay, use that stuff. It'll keep the water off to a point. It won't keep it out entirely, but it will help. Do any of you own gaiters? Okay, I don't know if I brought something on. Oh, yeah. You put this, I won't put it on. You put it under your heel, and it comes around here all the way up to here. If you don't have them, don't worry about it, but, you know, it keeps your clothes dry, and it's nice to have. Let's see what else. Oh, I have this item I have, but I couldn't find it. They're called crampons, and it's a little metal plate with teeth sticking down like this. And it fits right here on the arch of your shoe and buckles over the top. They're only about this long. And the reason I'm even mentioning it is for us older people, you get out on the ice, you can slip real easy. Wearing those in an icy condition will keep you safe. When we were in Russia, they never cleaned the sidewalks. They were almost a must. Falling down in the snow is not a fun thing to do. And if it's icy, you can get hurt. So you might want to think about that. And I know that Sportsman's Warehouse carries them. They're not expensive at all. But you got to keep them. I put mine where I would never forget them. I couldn't find them. Don't do that. Keep them out where you can see them. The other thing you might want to do, any of you use these? Walking sticks. You go up in the mountains and hiking, you'll see us older people. Paul and I hike together all the time, and we both use these. I can't remember what I paid for mine. Do you remember what you paid for yours?
$30 I paid for mine, and they can be used in the summer for hiking, to help your legs get some rest. They can be used in the winter. They have another thing that comes with them. They can be used for skiing if you want.
And they're extendable. You make them longer or shorter.
Great place to get those is Recreation Outlet, and Recreation Outlet, and it's on about 32nd and Main.
State Street.
Steak, is it
Yeah,
steak?
that's where I got mine.
Okay, yeah, they're great, we use them all the time.
That's one of the places I'm recommending you go to. And usually when I go look for something, I first go to the ski truck and then I go to Recreation Outlet. It's
Yeah.
just on the west side of State
Right,
Street.
right.
And they're like the ski truck, they buy up other companies' products. But if you're out in the snow and you're walking, and if you're like me, now I'm old enough that I have a little balance problem. Boy, these are a lifesaver. You want to think about that too. It's better to use these than have a broken hip. So, and they're not, you said 30, I think that's kind of,
Yeah, and they might be a little more now, because I got mine a couple of years ago. But
Yeah.
you can get cheaper ones too. The ones I got, you can actually get it where you want them and snap it shut, and they kind of hold better.
Yeah.
The kind that telescope, you can get some of them a little cheaper price.
yeah, this will too, these will telescope.
Yeah, well, I meant the tighten by turning versus a little clamp thing.
So, particularly for us older people. And while I'm talking about that, let me comment on something. The normal things you worry about with cold, and that is frostbite, hypothermia, and dehydration. But if you're, the one you should be thinking about is pneumonia. All of us carry the bacillus bacteria in our bodies, usually in the pleural sac around your lungs. If you get run down ill, that's usually when you'll get pneumonia, except those of us who are older are more susceptible. And little children. You get into a house where it's not warm, or any environment, and it's a little bit damp, you can get it real quick. And so as older people, I think you ought to need to consider that. It can happen real quick. And we talk about homes right now, and we'll go on and explain that just a little bit more. In a home, if you have a humidifier on your furnace, that's great, which we need. If you don't have it, you can always put a pot of water on your stove and let it just slowly simmer. You want to keep moisture in the air. When the temperature gets below 32 degrees, the air dries out. Have you ever been outside in an early morning and you see the sun hitting all these little crystals coming through the air? That's the moisture just coming out of the air. And that air is as dry as a desert. So if you're breathing it, you're not getting any moisture in your body, but you're exhaling moisture from your body, so you can get dehydrated very quickly. So in a home, you want to make sure you've got some sort of moisture there. Now, if your home does not have, if it just has single pane windows, you'll usually see moisture on the windows a little bit. You got to watch that, because if you're getting too much moisture in your house, that's as bad as not having enough. Because if for some reason your house gets cold and there's too much moisture in it, that's a perfect setup to get pneumonia. So if you're outside, and you're walking around a little bit, you're going to get dehydrated, no question about it, just like a desert. If you're inside, make sure you've got some sort of an equilibrium on that moisture, so there's not too much, but there's enough. If you don't have enough, you're going to start coughing probably, your kids will. Now, along with that, you want to do some things, when I'm talking now about below 32 degrees. If you have a house where you've got drafts in it, or you feel it's drafty, how do you find those drafts? Because you've got to plug it up. Get a candle, just walk around, you'll see the flame like this, where the drafts come. Plug it up. If you have a single pane window, put plastic over it or something. The air that's trapped between the pane and the plastic will heat up if the sun gets on it at all. But it'll keep that from radiating heat or cold into the house through a single pane. How many of you use flannel sheets in your bed?
Used to.
Boy, go get up there for winter. Oh, they're so much more comfortable than cotton. And they'll keep you warmer too. Now, the idea about having a sleeping bag is a good one. I'm not promoting sleeping bags at all. Two reasons for using a sleeping bag. If you use a mummy type, it keeps this part of your body warm. The other reason for using it is if it gets really cold and you have to leave the house, you can take it with you. You're going to have to go to some place like a church. You're going to be stuck there for a while because you can't stay in your house. You've got a sleeping bag, you can take it with you. There's another way to stay warm though. Can you guess what it is? I see you smiling back there,
I have a lot of weights,
Snuggle up. You got a husband or a wife, or you got a little
Neighbor.
kid, two bodies will stay warmer than one, every time.
Stay away.
When I was in the Army in basic training, I was at Fort Ord, and they took us up to Camp Hunter Liggett in the mountains for weapons training, and all they gave us was a pup tent and one wool blanket each. So the guy I was in the wool in the tent with, we just bear hugged each other all night long to stay warm. Either one of us had halitosis, so I guess it was all right. But things like this are pretty obvious, and if you don't think about it, eventually you're going to, being cold, you're going to do something about it. But these are ways you can do it. If you have a flue, if you have a wood-burning stove or a fireplace, and you're not using them, make sure those flues are cold or shut down. If you haven't got electricity and you got to cook, and you use a camp stove, like a Coleman camp stove, or charcoal, or one of those little stoves you put a piece of, I don't know what kind that chemical is, but you light it and it'll, yeah. Don't use it in your house. Don't ever use any of those. A good friend of mine, he had 3 of his sons. One had just come back from a mission. He had a cabin down near Beaver, deer hunting. His 3 sons went down there. They had a charcoal cooker outside, a burner. They brought it in the house to stay warm at night. Killed all 3 of them. All 3 of them. So that sort of thing, just be aware. Don't let it happen. Some other things you can do to help keep your house warm. If you have a warm bath, don't pour the water out. Don't pull the sink in. Let it stay there until the water cools down. All that heat's coming out. How about an oven? How about a laundry dryer? As long as there's heat coming out, make use of it. Just leave the doors open. All of that will help you stay warm. And of course, if you have curtains, it's nice if you have insulated curtains, but even if you don't, they certainly will help. Except if you got the sun coming in a window, open the curtains, because that sun's going to come through and you'll stay warmer for that. Let's see, what did I miss? Oh. I mentioned I was back in Ohio when we had that 6-day war was going on and we got cut off from gas and so forth. And what a lot of people did back there was they just closed down part of their house. Take a blanket and cover the hallway or something. Just don't use one end of your house. And just keep the heat in the one area you're in. The other thing that you can do, let's see how I say this. No, can't remember. The one problem you've got with water in your home is it freezes, particularly if you have a tap on the outside wall. Coming up to your sink or to a bathroom, that can freeze. Now you can go over to Home Depot and buy a little plastic or foam thing like this that fits over your tap. It will help. That isn't the best. That won't do it entirely. The best thing to do is take some of that heat tape, if you can, and put it around the pipes near the wall. You can plug them in. It'd be possible to do that. The other trick to do is leave the water on, just a little bit. Keep the water moving. It's less likely to freeze. The worst thing you can do is just shut those taps off, don't do anything, and then when everything thaws out, guess what? You're going to have some broken pipes. You're going to have water everywhere. So it's something to think about when you winterize your home. I guess that's all I've got on that. Oh, yeah. If you have a ceiling fan, the blades, you can reverse them. What a fan does usually is it takes the air out of the ground, out of the room, up. You reverse the blades and it puts the air down. Now when you heat a room, where does all the warm air go first? It goes up. And so that fan will push it back down. The other thing is if you've got a basement and that basement, you know, it's part of your living area, not just a storage area, keep the door shut. Because any heat that's down in the basement's gonna come up and your basement's gonna stay cold. If you've got bedrooms down there or anything like that, or bathrooms, you wanna keep that heat adjusted. That's what we have, and we keep that door closed, and sometimes our basement's a little warmer than the rest of the house. So these are things, that, tricks, or whatever you wanna call them, that work. Now, let's talk about food for just a little bit here. Those of you who like carbohydrates, this is your day. Carbohydrates will turn to sugar quicker than anything else. You want plenty of protein. When I was in the mountain troops, we got a ration and a half of meat every day. We needed the protein in the winter. But carbohydrates, fats, that's what you want. You want that kind of food because you got to generate heat. Let me ask you a question. How do you what's the best way to stay warm?
In front of a fireplace.
Keep moving.
What?
Go get a room at the Hill.
Keep
Keep moving.
It's your body walking, moving.
For that.
You'll generate heat. The worst problem we had when I was in the mountain troops was it was a drafty army, and we'd get kids from, bring in 600 at a time. And they were from every state. And the kids were from, upper Washington, Idaho, Montana, North Dakota, upper state New York. They did great. They didn't have any problem. But the kids from Arkansas, Florida, never even seen snow, and there they are out, dropped off this train at Pando Junction, 6 feet of snow, and they'd never even seen snow. And the first thing they'd do when they're outside is they just wouldn't move. And you'd say move, and they'd just shuffle their feet. Go kick them a little bit, because the movement's what keeps you warm. That's what makes the insulation work well. You just got to control it so you're not sweating. That's the main thing. But moving is important. If you're outside, don't stand there. If you're waiting for a bus, I don't know what to tell you, but anything else, move. That's the way you'll generate heat.
Richard? Our bodies know that that's important. That's why we shiver.
That's right.
Because that movement generates heat.
Exactly. And that's the first stage of hypothermia. You ever had involuntary shaking? That's the first stage of it.
You mean like right before I give a talk, I'm in the process?
Well, I don't know about that.
Then you can
Breaks
go
out
home.
sweat too.
Cold sweat.
One of the problems you'll run into is sanitation. If your water is stopped and your water heater isn't working, well, it doesn't matter about that, but if you can't use the toilet, then what do? Well, in the past, what I've used is garbage bags and get it out of the house. Sanitation with people closed in is more difficult. So you want to, whatever you get in the way of waste, get it out of the house. That's the important thing. How do most of us catch colds? I give you a hug, I got a cold and I give you a hug, is that going to give you a cold? Good. The doorknobs. It's that sort of thing. Close proximity. You got to be very careful about that. So when you're in a crowded situation or just a normal family and you're in a house and you can't get away from each other or any sort of situation, be a little extra careful about that sort of thing. And once you start a cold going in an excluded, inclusive area like that, everybody gets it. We would be out training, like I said, down to 40 below. None of us would get sick. As soon as we came into the barracks, we'd all start catching cold because we were around each other. I think out in the cold, though, every time you breathe, you kill the virus. Killed everything else. Okay, let's talk about hypothermia. I mentioned shivering. first stage. What happens when you get hypothermia? You're lowering the body temperature of the core. This is your core right here. That's what's getting lowered, and that's why you're shivering. That's why you don't shiver necessarily, you just get your hands wet or cold. So the next step in that is what?
Feel warm? You just feel warm after the shiver, or?
Well, it helps you.
No, I mean, like, when you're in the process of freezing to death, don't you feel a sense of lethargy, or you
Yeah.
tired or something like that?
First of all, you're gonna notice somebody, and their speech is gonna get slurred. They won't be able to talk quite well. I had this happen. I had some guys with me up in Manitoba canoeing. We got down near Hudson Bay. The water was 55 degrees and one of the canoes tipped over. We got him out and one of them had hypothermia and he could hardly talk. His hands were like this. And so the next thing you'll see is non-communication. They just won't be able to talk, and then lethargy sets in. And once lethargy starts, you got a real problem. This person's in serious trouble. The thing you cannot do with somebody who's into hypothermia, particularly deep hypothermia, is you cannot warm up their extremities. You've got to warm up this part right here. Why? Because the air or the blood out here in your extremities is extremely cold. So you start getting the exercise or put their hands in warm water or something like that, you're going to just push cold water into their heart and you can kill them. So you're in a triage situation. Do you know what that means? If you come on an accident and there's several people injured, you've got to make a decision which one you're going to help. And you may not help the one that's hurt the worst because it doesn't look like he's going to make it anyway. Well, this is what you got, a triage situation. This person his hands might be just chalk white, or his feet. You got to lower it and warm this part up right here. How do you do that? You can't do it by throwing him in a hot bathtub. Kill him.
Put them in a sleeping bag with someone else.
Right.
Put them in a sleeping bag with someone else.
You get a sleeping bag and you get somebody in it and you get that person in with them. Oh dear. But you gotta take the clothes off. Okay, this is life. I sat one night, well, when I was training, teaching guys to ski, and we were on maneuvers, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. We're still out there, and it was like 21 below or 22 below. And one of the guys that I was responsible for, he started being wobbly on his skis, and I said, "What's wrong?" He says, "I can't feel my feet." If you ever get to that point where you can't feel your feet, you've got to do something now. Not 10 minutes from now, but now. Had a little mountain tent, we put it up, I got in there, put him in there, pulled his shoes off, and the bottom of his feet were as gray, as who's got a gray coat on or something. They were almost like your, what's your word right there? I spent the rest of the night with his feet in my stomach. Oh, that's not fun. And when you're thawing out from that sort of thing, he had hypothermia too, badly. And we got him warmed up before I started thawing his feet out. But when I got to the point where I could feel like his core temperature was okay, and I put his feet in my stomach and all night long. And when you go through that, coming out of frostbite, oh, it is painful, really painful. They got him back down to Camp Hale, and they had to surgically just take most of the flesh off the bottom of his feet. It was dead.
How do you tell if the core temperature is at the right temperature? How can you tell?
You'll tell. They'll tell you. They'll be reactive. You'll know when they're okay. They don't have to be up to 98 degrees, but they'll be pretty close. You'll know. Not a problem. So, you go from shivering to slurred speech to no communication to lethargy. And the way you control it is you get somebody when you put a person that's hypothermic in a sleeping bag, you know, if you get in a sleeping bag, it'll warm up, right? Because you warm it up. But they can't do that, so somebody's gotta get in there with them. If you haven't got a sleeping bag, get some blankets and wrap around both of them. You gotta give them some body heat, so this part of their body warms up. So the best thing to do, it's like many things, is don't get hypothermic. Stay dry, stay hydrated. The best way, one of the easiest ways to encourage or to bring on frostbite or hypothermia is you get dehydrated. Sounds strange, doesn't it? But it's true. How do you know when you're dehydrated? Under conditions like we've just been describing. It's easy. Check the color of your urine. It starts turning dark. You got a problem. And you may not even be thirsty, but it'll be, you start drinking. Yes?
I was just noticing from when we go out hiking and winter stuff that we do, you don't feel like you need to drink water. And you think, oh, I'm fine. You don't get thirsty like you do in the summer, so you almost have to just plan on drinking. Because if you don't think about it, you won't drink anything because you don't feel like you need it, and then all of a sudden you're gonna get in trouble, so.
Thank you, Paul.
Plan on drinking. Plan on drinking if it's bad, cold weather.
Of course, Paul puts beer in his, no, I'm sorry. No, he doesn't.
What's he gonna tell?
By the way, caffeine and alcohol aren't really good to use in cold weather. The caffeine enlarges your blood vessels, and alcohol gets you a quick charge, and then you cool off. When I was in Russia, the sure cure for hypothermia, the Russians told me, a good stiff shot of vodka. Anyway, stay dry, keep hydrated, and eat. Eat well. It's the best way to keep away from hypothermia. And dress well. Make sure you're not getting cold. You're wet. Frostbite, what does it look like? Everybody had it? Okay, if you got, like, say you got it right here. It'll look a little chalky white, and then it'll go red. And again, this is something you take care of now, right now. Best thing to do, right there, hand, put it on there. Not a wet glove. And it hurts to thaw out. If it's just mild frostbite, it won't. But if you have deep frostbite and you get over it, that place where you had it will hurt every winter for 2 or 3 years. I promise you. So when you get, if you have a chance to get this on your face, this is where you usually get it, your face and your ears. I remember one time when I was on the ski patrol, it was 14 below, and people were out there skiing, and there was this young kid, high school kid, no hat on, and his ears were both chalk white. I says, hey, look at your ears. He said, I'm okay. I says, no, you're not. And he said, well, I'm getting on the lip. I said, no, you're not. I don't know what happened, but I can almost guarantee what happened. His ears probably swole up, the skin split, and he had a drainage out of it, and it was extremely painful. Because if it gets bad, it will do that. It'll swell up and then split. Ugly. So, in frostbite, the best thing you can do out in the cold is buddy up. Never go out there alone. Have someone with you and look at each other's faces. Watch it. If it's your hands that are cold, how do you warm them up? Yeah.
This is a good way to.
Yeah, between your legs. One or the other. As close to your skin as you can get them.
Richard?
Now, again, yes.
Also, in getting cold, you lose sensitivity to your body, so if you fall, and you could be bleeding and not know it. So you gotta have someone check you, someone other than yourself, check you for bleeding, for broken bones, all those different things.
We're going to get to that in just a minute.
Sorry.
When I was on the ski patrol, I got called down to one of the lower runs. It was kind of a beginner run. there was this lady laying on the snow on her back, and I said, "Are you okay?" She says, "No, I'm really hurting." I said, "Where?" And she points back here. I lifted her up and looked, and there was blood on the ground, on the snow. Somehow, she lost her pole and punctured her buttocks with her own pole about that deep, and didn't feel it. She didn't even know what happened. This was before we got all about gloves. And so I just took my mitten off and picked some of the snow up, and I said, "What about this?" I shouldn't have done that because she just passed right. Yeah, you're right though. You can be injured and not know it. And I'm going to get back to that in a moment. Don't. This is the old thing, standby. They said, if you got frostbite, rub snow on it. Don't do that. Those below 32 degrees, that snow is ice crystals, and you're just damaging the skin. You don't rub it ever. Just don't do that. If the core temperature's fine, you can put their hands in mild warm water, not hot water. You can actually burn somebody that way. And same with the feet. But the best way to thaw them out is like I did with that guy. I just put his feet in my stomach and stayed the night.
So what'd you do with that lady when she was on the ground and she had her thing poked in her behind? What, you just
Well, she had a puncture wound.
transported her?
Yeah.
And
I just put a Band-Aid, I have one of these
compress?
big, thick, like a combat
Yeah.
a veterans or army. Put it on there, transported her.
Okay.
All right. Dehydration. Again, I think we said all we need to about that. Now, what Jamie was talking about here is really critical. If somebody falls down and they're really cold, they won't know if they're hurt. They possibly, a lot of times they just don't feel it. And you may not know it. The thing you cannot do is move them immediately. Why? If they say they got a hurt, go ahead.
Well, you don't know what injury has been done to the spinal cord or anything else along that line, so you can cause more damage.
They may complain about a hurt leg and they may have a broken back. It happens. I sure ran into that in the ski patrol. The thing you gotta be careful about is you don't move somebody without checking them over. What do you do when you check someone over? Over their whole body. Now, this gets to be a little touchy. If you're a man and there's a woman hurt, what are you gonna do? You're gonna do the same thing, vice versa. Any part of their body that they'll come, I had a young man who was on a snowboard, and he flipped like this and landed on his, right here, on his back. He was just standing there. I said, "You okay?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "No, something's wrong." I laid him down, and when I put my hand back here, he started screaming. He had ruptured a kidney and didn't even know it. So you don't move somebody because they have a broken neck, a concussion. You don't know.
I have a son who's a fireman, and I was really impressed when my granddaughter got hurt, and she was complaining of her leg. But he was very, very careful when he says, "All right, now I'm going to touch you here. I'm going to touch you there. Now I'm going to get a little higher, but I'm not doing anything. I just want you to be comfortable. I'm just checking you." And it settled her down really well.
That's what I
Of
did.
course, Mom was impressed,
Yeah.
That's my son.
Well, yeah, there's always, you don't know what he's really doing, so, yeah. You do that with being polite about it.
Mhm.
But if somebody's injured and you have any suspicion at all about a head or back injury, you gotta put a collar on them. And that may not be you may not have one available. The only thing you can do then is you've got to get them where they're warm. A cold weather will always make the injury worse. So you've got to have more than one person there, one on their head, one on the shoulders, one on the hips, one on the feet, and roll them over to a point where you can have them, you can put them in a sleeping bag or something like that. But you don't change the configuration. If their head's like that, that's the way it's got to go in. And you make sure that they stay that way. You just don't know what the injury is. You have no way of knowing it. When I got a dislocated shoulder when I was ski patrol, and if their arm was out like that, that's the way they went in, just like that. That's the way we would put their arm in a bandage or a splint that would hold it like that. So that's the same thing. One of the worst things you can have happen in a winter situation is icy, hard snow or something like that, and someone falls and hits their head and they're unconscious, because you don't know what's going on. A few things you can do: check for what they call battle signs right back here. It's bruising back here. It means they're probably bleeding internally. The other thing is look at their eyes. Are they bleeding there? Or mouth or nose? But they may not be coherent. I had several injuries, head injuries, where the person, when they finally revived, didn't know where they were. That's what happens when they have it. Okay. So just quickly, I just got a note here to quit. Is there any questions you have? Any observations?
Rich, did you mention hats? The
Yeah.
head? Did you mention about the head, that you lose most of your heat through your head?
Yeah, I had mentioned that, yeah. Keep a hat on. Keep your feet and hands warm. Oh no, I've had some great experiences out there.
Sun protection? Sun
Oh,
protection?
yeah. When you're out, of course, in the snow, you know very well you're getting the sun rays on you, and you're getting it from the snow too. And getting sunburned is no fun, you know it. But the worst thing you can do is sunburn your eyeballs, and you can do that. And it is painful. I had it happen once too. But dark glasses, a must. If you don't have them, what can you do? Pull your hat down? Yeah, that'll help. Get yourself a piece of cardboard and cut a couple of slits in it and put it here. That's what Eskimos do. They have a piece of bone with a little slit like this. That's, that just gets you where you want to go with, so you can get something for it. Okay. Is there any questions at all?
So you have the address for that place, the ski truck? Address, and
Oh,
all?
I've got it. Okay, let me pass these out. This is a kind of a catch-all of everything. Pass them around.
We hope you're finding these kinds of lessons that we're putting on informative, opening some doors, some understanding for you so you can better protect you and your family. Because it's very possible, I'm sure you're well aware that last month we had over 200 earthquakes. We never know when something's gonna hit, and when it hits, it can be fast.
Well, one of the troubles you run into with cold weather, if this valley gets blanketed, and we get these weather inversions, and it gets really cold here, in a lot of ways, the hospital will be pretty full pretty quick. It can certainly happen. And you may very well be on your own, or the neighborhood may be on their own. And so learning how to take care of yourself is the first thing you need to do. And you can buy some of this stuff. I'll bet a lot of what you got, you could get out of your own house. It's just using it wisely. Yes?
Well, just like we heard on the news just a few days back, those two little girls that got lost out there, if they hadn't had training, they probably would have passed away.
Right, yeah. But and somebody had trained them right to do what they did. When I was up in Canada, I spent one winter up in the northern part of Ontario. And the warmest it got for 6 weeks was 20 below. 2 weeks that time it was 30 below. And it was a town that was built along a river. And as you're walking along, and when it's that cold, there's no birds, there's no nothing. It's just cold and it's just quiet. All of a sudden there was a bang. A little while later, another bang. What I found out was happening in the birch trees, the sap going down in the fall. Some of it wouldn't get down far enough, and that frost was so bad that the sap would expand like water and just blow the tree. And you start thinking about that, and you're out in it, like that poem I read, it's like being stabbed with like a driven nail. And it can consume your thinking, you know, you're just miserable. You can't, you've got to think about what you're at, where you're at, and what you're doing. The chances of getting hurt are too good. Frostbite, hypothermia, not good. I was skiing one time, backcountry skiing up near Targhee, and there was several couples, and one of the women fell in a creek on her skis. And we were about 4 miles from the lodge, and the only thing we could do was get her on her feet, and she was just move, and we just literally raced back there. And when she got there, she was blue, but she was not hypothermic entirely. Her own body just moving was enough to keep the blood circulating enough that she survived it. So when you think about being in a situation where it's cold, even if it's just like this weather, you know, just be a little wise about how you dress. It'll make a world of difference. I run into a lot of people, so I just don't like the cold. Well, okay. You gonna change it? You gonna tell God to turn the thermostat up? No. Or you can be miserable in there, or you can be reasonably comfortable. You really can. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was gonna add one thing. On people who have their houses with an electric clothes dryer, I just put a filter on the end of it and vent the heat into the house.
Good idea.
That's correct. There is a device that you can do that with, and you keep moisture.
To begin with, I just put a nylon sock in it, like dust.
Yeah.
And it's, it'll heat the whole basement.
I never thought of that.
And when you're doing clothes, it just heats the whole place right up. And that smells good too.
By the way, you can get hypothermic above 32 degrees. If you're out and you get wet and you're cold and shivering, you can get hypothermia. It doesn't have to be freezing. Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
I was snowed in West Yellowstone 2 weeks ago. The last one in the